If you want to know something about St. Brigid, oh, that's the end of it. You can't. While there is a brief hagiography and lesser feast and fast dutifully available on our Daily Office app, which confidently says things about St. Brigid, the most you can rely on is that, like most things said about St. Brigid, it's confident in what it says, but it's mostly unsure. We don't really know if her father was a chieftain, though that's the story, and her mother a slave. That kind of works out nicely. A Christian mother and a pagan father. She apparently squandered or gave away her parents' wealth as a girl. If that sounds a little bit like yesterday, there's a reason for that. It's because this is the standard thing you say about monastics. And in fact, especially the standard thing you say about female monastics who supposedly created monasteries. But with yesterday's saint, we have actual contemporaries who wrote things down about what she did. We have some confidence they are not just concocting it. With Brigid, we really don't have much at all. In the 12th century, that's about 800 years later, 700 years later, there was a monastery in Kildare, and the nuns there had the idea of a perpetual flame in honor of St. Brigid, official founder of the community. And those nuns kept that flame going until the Reformation. Of course, that's 12th century. We have history for that. Those nuns, true to the tradition of St. Brigid, kind of made up the idea that this flame was much older than them and had existed since Brigid's monastery, despite there being no reason to think Brigid's monastery, if there had been one, survived much past Brigid's time. It's not mentioned by anyone. And by the 19th century, with the notice that there apparently seems to have been a pagan goddess in Ireland named Brigid, it's as if these two are kinds of flypaper. Brigid, ecclesiastical flypaper, and the goddess Brigid, pagan flypaper, and both have acquired an awful lot of flies, making it hard to know what's fly and what's paper, and then the two stuck together. So then in the 19th century, well, if the 12th century nuns said that this perpetual flame had been going since the 5th century, why not since pagan antiquity? And confident statements you will find that the pagan goddess had her feast day on the same February 1st, which is amazing because the Celts didn't even use the Roman calendar. So I'm not sure what day is the February 1st that they're talking about, but nor did pagan gods have feast days in the sense that we think of it. So there's not much we can do with Brigid. The compilers of our lectionary, however, have clearly noticed the flame tradition, which is represented in her traditional iconography, and captured it quite beautifully in the collect. And then they noticed that in the Sermon on the Mount, you have these two sections which talk about giving away wealth. Oh, that's good. That goes with the story. Sandwiched around the eyes as the lamp of the body. It just seems like a pericope dropped from heaven for St. Brigid. So what is Matthew doing here with these texts? Perhaps like Brigid's stories, the Sermon on the Mount doesn't get used very well in the Episcopal Church. The Sermon on the Mount is carved up by the lectionary, mostly in year A, and mostly in those Sundays that get dropped at the end of Epiphany and right after Pentecost. What is perhaps the most profound section of Matthew's Gospel has, by probably relative accident, gotten consigned to oblivion. And this passage pretty much doesn't even make that cut. It starts with what we all know from Ash Wednesday, with the teaching on prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, each of which is described as a thing that one should not do the way the hypocrites do it, which is to say, to be noticed, to be respected and honored for it, but rather because of its intrinsic spiritual weight. a good reading for Ash Wednesday, a long traditional reading for Ash Wednesday. And the last one of the three is almsgiving, which leads directly into the next thing, which we have just heard, which is about giving money. And then eyes and lamps and light. We'll come back to that. And then two masters. You cannot serve God and money. And then the teaching on not worrying about where your food and your shelter will come from, because God cares for you more than the flowers of the field and the sparrows. The unifying theme of all of this is security and where it comes from. Does your prayer, fasting, and almsgiving give you security because you have aligned yourself with religion correctly? And the clear point of Jesus is, if you're doing it because you'll be noticed by other people and they will then support you and help you, a long-standing risk of the religious life, beware. It's fake, he says. And the Protestant reformers, to their credit, also would add, if you think you're getting God to support you and help you for doing these things instead of the religious establishment, also no good. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do them, but don't do them because you think it makes God especially happy with you, and therefore God will care for you. That's consistent with the end of the passage, isn't it? So then we are told you should not serve God and money. You cannot serve God and wealth. If you did not know that this was a quote from the Bible, and you were told no one can serve two masters, and you were asked why, you would not give what Jesus says is the reason. You would say, because they might give inconsistent commands. The reason you can't serve two masters is one master might say do this, and the other master might say do that, and now you have a problem. This is not what Jesus is concerned about. Jesus is concerned about you cannot love them both. To serve the master for Jesus is to love the master. An odd thing to say. He assumes that the reason you cannot love two masters is because you will despise one and love the other. You cannot love two masters at the same time, and to serve a master is to love that master. He is equating service and love. And the positive version of equating service and love is what the I story is about. It's what is going on with eyes, the bit that our lectionary most carefully excludes from Sunday. Your eye is the thing with which you see the needs of others. If you are going to be doing almsgiving, your eye figures out where to give the money. Not in the way that makes the most impressive result for the worldly view, but in the place where the need is. And if your eye sees clearly, then your love is there and your service is there, and it will redound in your heart, and your whole body will be filled with light. But if you cannot see the need, and our cities are filled with need that we tend to practice very carefully to not see, if you cannot see, then you cannot help, and you cannot give, and you cannot love. And that will then redound to your heart, and what a darkness that will be. So to serve and to love are the same thing. To love money is therefore to serve money. To love money is therefore to be a servant of money, a slave to money, which is not what the world would have said. The world would have said, the reason for storing up treasure is to make yourself secure and safe. And what Jesus says If your goal is security and safety, you will end up a servant of the wealth. It will not be your servant, you will be its. And if that goes along with blindness to others around you, the darkness will affect you. So do not store up treasures on earth, but store them up in heaven. Not because you earn safety. Do not worry about what you will eat or where you will sleep. God knows that you need food and that you need shelter. And when you are worried about your own food and your own shelter, you are very likely to start becoming blind to those who need food and shelter. And you may fail to consider that God has put you there precisely as God's way of addressing those people's need for food and shelter. Ordinary, basic human needs. A pox on those who think Matthew's gospel is all spiritualizing. This is as earthy and direct as it can be. If you are praying, fasting, and giving alms because it makes you impressive, cut that out. If you are praying, fasting, and giving alms because you think God will love you more, you're a fool. God already loves you more than you could possibly know. Do not store up your treasure because you think it will give you safety. Moths will chew your sweaters and thieves will steal your coin. It doesn't work. That doesn't mean you shouldn't have money. It just means it has a purpose, and safety was never the point. The point is your eyes. That flame. Keep that flame burning for hundreds of years. If you need to imagine that the flame has been burning for thousands of years, that's fine. That's fine. God knows what you need. Your goods are there not to provide your needs. They are there to provide others.